humble domestic chick, which is not traditionally considered a champion of mental life, is in fact an interesting model for investigating the animal mind. The chicks are precocial, which means that as soon as they hatch, they are quite mature and mobile. So in the lab, we can precisely control the chick's sensory and motor experience and observe how this affects their behavior. Also, chicks show an amazing form of learning called filial imprinting. Very young chicks quickly learn to recognize an object if they are placed near to it for a while, and then they will try desperately to stay close to it. Obviously, this would normally be the mother hen, but in our experiment, we took advantage of the fact that imprinting can occur even with inanimate objects like simple colored cylinders. Here is a simple example. The chick is confined in a transparent pen and can see the imprinting object moving and disappearing behind one or other of two identical opaque screens. An opaque partition is placed in front of the transparent container. After a delay, during which the chick has to maintain in memory the position of the imprinting object, it is free to search. Chicks are very good at this task, even with delays as long as 60 seconds. Their performances are comparable to those of primates. We used a similar setup to see if chicks had an understanding of some basic properties such as size or shape and the way in which they could affect the visual occlusion of other objects. Some chicks were imprinted on a tall object and others on a wide one. And during tests, the chick was placed in a transparent holding box and was able to see the object moving along a straight midline towards the two identical screens. Their view was then obscured and the imprinting object was removed. The screens were replaced with two that were no longer identical. For example, the height or width was changed so that only one screen was large enough for the imprinting object to be hidden behind it. The partition was then removed and the chick was free to search for the object. Chicks typically choose to search only behind the screen that could hide the object. So we found that chicks have very sophisticated abilities concerning physical objects and the properties of occlusion. They seem to be born with a sort of intuitive physics. We use the same technique to explore chicks' abilities to perform simple addition and subtraction with small numbers. We knew from previous experiments that when chicks have been imprinted on artificial objects like these ones, they prefer to approach groups with more rather than fewer objects. Let's look at a simple example. Chicks are presented with an object which disappears behind a screen on the right, and then with a series of objects that disappear behind a screen on the left. One object, two objects, three objects, and four. We have had addition up to this point. Now we try some subtraction. One object is moved from the left to the right, and then another one moves from the left to the right. So at this point, we would expect that chick will choose the screen on the right side, and it does. But perhaps this was only because that was the last screen where it saw an object go. This can be easily checked for that. Come back to the addition. And this time, we'll only move one object from the left to the right. So the expectation would be that the chick would choose the screen on the left side. And this is exactly what chicks do. So this shows that chicks are able to carry out simple mental arithmetic, performing addition and subtraction with small numbers. Chicks also show good understanding of counting. For example, that number 4 comes after number 3 and before number 5. For example, different group of chicks were trained to feed from, say, the 3rd, the 4th, or the 6th container in a series of 10. And chicks were able to identify the correct container, whatever the length of the row. But were chicks using the number or simply the distance from the starting point to the correct food container? To check for this, the distance between the balls was changed. Now the second ball is where the 4th ball used to be, and the 4th is much farther away. So if the chick is using distance to solve the problem, it should choose the 2nd and not the 4th container. However, results show that chicks choose the correct serial number and not simply the distance. Chicks' number cognition also illustrates nicely the lateralization of their brain Leslie Rogers described, namely that the left and the right side of the brain perform different functions exactly as in human beings. In one study, we trained chicks to feed only from the 3rd out of 7 food containers whose position in a circular arena was changed throughout the testing trials. The chicks learned the problem, but they consistently showed a strange stereotype behavior while counting. They always moved from left to right, even though the 3rd ball was not close to that end of the line of balls. So we decided to investigate this curious phenomenon in a simple experiment. When the bird is placed in front of a line of 16 identical positions, and food was only placed under the same position, say the 4th, chicks learn the task very easily. Then, at testing, when we rotate the line of balls, which position is the bird going to regard as correct? The 4th from the left or the 4th from the right? They choose systematically the 4th from the left. The existence of a mental line of number that extends from left to right is very well known in humans. However, this is usually explained as a result of writing and reading habits, and this is something that our chicks obviously cannot do. But it seems more likely that in the brains of these little chicks, like in human beings, visual attention is preferentially directed to the left because of the selective activation of the right hemisphere. So asymmetries of attention are not uniquely human characteristics that underlie an allegedly superior cognitive ability of human beings.